Okay, we're going to be hot in 15 seconds, people. Stand by. Queue open.
Talent, check your spot.
Audio up.
Clear the set, everybody.
Stand by camera 3. Stand by camera 1. Camera 4, check your focus.
Carol, make sure the phone guests are standing by.
Stand by camera 2.
Okay, Don, we're ready out here.
Okay, thanks. Let's rock and roll. Count them in.
10, 9,
Here we go.
8,
Flying graphic.
7,
Camera 2, I'm going to be coming to you
5,
first. Stand by to cue mark.
4, 3, 2.
And cue mark.
Hello, I'm Mark Crutcher, President of Life Dynamics, and this is Life Talk for August 2015. We're going to kick things off with Alan Ackles and this month's Life Talk News. Alan?
All right, thank you, Mark. A pro-choice police officer in Austin, Texas is under investigation after his girlfriend was found dead from 3 gunshot wounds to the head. Investigators discovered that 29-year-old Samantha Dean had received messages from Vontre Clark demanding that she have an abortion because his life would be ruined and he would lose his family if she had their baby. After the victim refused to have the abortion, co-workers claimed she told them that if she ended up dead, that Clark was the one who killed her. The officer has not yet been charged in the murder, which police say may have involved 3 other people connected to Clark. He has since been placed on administrative leave. Well, American Life League has released a report summarizing the top salaries of Planned Parenthood personnel and CEOs. According to the report, the organization receives hundreds of millions of dollars in federal tax dollars each year and recently got an additional $23 million from the Department of Health and Human Services for a teen pregnancy project. Planned Parenthood's 62 affiliates brought in more than $1 billion in 2013 alone, and according to government documents, its CEOs collectively made over $11.5 million. In addition, the average annual salary for top employees was almost $350,000, with the average salary paid to a Planned Parenthood state affiliate CEO being almost $200,000. The report also found that 87% of Planned Parenthood staffers make over $100,000, 37% make over $200,000, and 13% make over $300,000 per year. Planned Parenthood's president, Cecile Richards, is reported to make nearly $600,000 per year. In New Jersey, an abortionist once cited for sexual abuse may have his medical license suspended or revoked for taking part in an illegal scam with notorious abortionist Stephen Chase Brigham. As we previously reported on Life Talk News, Brigham lost his license in the state after it was discovered that he started late-term abortions in his South Jersey office and then ordered the women involved to drive to his Maryland clinic to finish the procedure. Now Brigham's medical director, Vikram Kaji, is accused of fraud after he collaborated with Brigham to keep his New Jersey abortion clinics operating. State law prohibits doctors whose licenses have been revoked from operating clinics in the state, but to keep its facilities open, Brigham claimed that he sold his interests to Kaji. However, Kaji later told an investigator from the Division of Consumer Affairs that he was not the actual owner of the clinic. Life Dynamics President Mark Crutcher detailed Kaji's sexual abuse in his book, Lime 5. Well, the Brussels-based European Council has chastised British moms for wanting to stay home to look after their children. The Council recommendation report found that in 2013, the number of women who they labeled as inactive because they have no full-time employment were almost twice as high as the average for all of Europe. The Council called for the British government to work to eliminate what the report deemed a social challenge by providing more state-funded child care. The recommendations prompted indignant responses from British citizens who say the Council has no business criticizing mothers who choose to stay at home. In the ongoing case of pro-choice violence, there have been 2 reported incidents where pro-choice men waved guns at pro-life protesters outside clinics, resulting in only 1 arrest. Police in Tennessee arrested 32-year-old Derek Doss outside the Bristol Women's Clinic abortion clinic after he brandished a gun at pro-life demonstrators as he walked into the clinic with his girlfriend. Officials say that Doss was charged with aggravated assault after they found him carrying a loaded pistol he had taken from his vehicle. The clinic is owned by an abortionist who had also threatened pro-lifers with a gun years earlier. And meanwhile, police in North Carolina have refused to arrest a man who pulled out a weapon to threaten abortion protesters there. A video of the incident taken outside a woman's choice abortion clinic in Raleigh shows the pro-choice man pulling out his gun when demonstrators offered him help as he drove a woman to the clinic. Police let the armed pro-choice man go, claiming they had nothing to charge him with. However, A few days earlier, the protesters say police opened a criminal case against them for, quote, having their sign touching a fence and blocking the public right-of-way with tiny fetal models laying on the grass nearby the curb, unquote. Canadian officials are now asking how a child could have been impregnated by her 35-year-old stepfather and taken for 2 abortions before she turned 13 without a report being made to authorities. According to court documents, the girl was instructed to tell medical staff her boyfriend was the father. The stepfather was arrested years later after he assaulted another teenage girl and her mother. It was at this time that the sexual abuse of the 13-year-old became known to authorities, and the perpetrator has since pleaded guilty to multiple counts of sexual assault. Life Dynamics has documented that American pedophiles routinely use abortion to cover their crimes, and that report can be read at childpredators.com. Well, in a victory for free speech, the town of Jackson, Wyoming, and a local government insurance pool have agreed to pay $50,000 to settle a federal civil rights lawsuit filed by several pro-lifers. The case was initiated after town officials secured a state court order barring the Reverend Chet Gallagher and the pro-life group Operation Save America from demonstrating on the town square. In 2012, the Wyoming Supreme Court ruled that the lower court had violated the pro-life group's rights when it issued the order. The decision followed a court order for the city to pay another pro-life pastor $225,000 to settle an earlier federal lawsuit on a similar charge. And finally, a pro-life school teacher in Pennsylvania is taking on the biggest teachers union in the state because she feels her First Amendment rights are being trampled by the organization. Linda Misja said she is taking the Pennsylvania State Education Association to court because she has religious objections to the union's support of abortion rights groups. The state allows teachers to direct that their dues be donated to an organization of their choice, but when Misja requested that her dues be given to a Pittsburgh pro-life group, the union denied her request and suggested she send the money to Planned Parenthood. The lawsuit seeks to establish that the union cannot arbitrarily choose which organizations a member can or cannot support. Alan Ackles here for Life Talk News. Additional details on these and other stories are available on the Life Dynamics blog, and you can also get daily news updates by logging on to prolifeamerica.com. Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Alan. Well, everybody's back. Hello, Renee.
Hello.
Destiny's back this month, and wandering back onto the reservation is Troy after months of riotous living, and he shows back up again.
Thanks, Mark. Glad to be back.
Of course, one of the biggest things going on right now in the pro-life movement, and we do have a ton of stuff to talk about today, is the follow-up on our original thing on the baby parts investigation, and lots of new stuff coming out on this. And, you know, I've had people, I've talked about it here on the show before, people have called me and said, is this still going on? And matter of fact, I think we said something about it not long ago. I said, it never stopped. It's obviously going on, and this is just validation of that. So.
Right. I mean, your seminal work, was that 2000, 1999?
Well, we started out, Zentra and I started the investigation in 97, and we were undercover for 31 months and then brought the stuff out in 2000.
So isn't it amazing that
ago.
This shows your legacy, Mark? Okay. The investigation that you started that is now in full-blown, press mode, right. It's completely viral all over the internet, was done. Your stuff was done when this young man, David DeLaRosa, was about 11 or 12 years old.
Right. Well, one of the things, this thing is getting, we got a ton of press at the time, but nothing like what's happening now. And
well, there wasn't social media.
There wasn't the internet at the time. That's the difference now. Not only do you have the publicity that the internet brings to it, but the media has to give it more publicity because they can't afford to fall behind the curve on this and make it look like the media is covering an important story that they're missing out on.
Right.
So they're having to give it more attention too.
Well, and I would say, and it's also, I mean, I've said this in the past years, and nobody believes me because I'm just another pro-lifer saying it, but when we're actually hearing it come out of the mouths of the people who are performing it, these procedures and selling off these body parts, you can no longer deny that it's actually happening. And that's why I think you're seeing a lot of people who maybe were skeptical in the beginning, they're flat out having to acknowledge that this is what they're supporting when they support Planned Parenthood.
Great point, Destiny. This is what it's like to go to lunch with an abortionist. This isn't the scripted press conference at the big national presser in Washington, D.C. They're not sitting there on their talking points with all the glitz and glam and Obama's talking and so forth. This is what it's like to go to lunch with an abortionist. What do you talk about? You talk about how to harvest the baby's organs and sell them off at a profit. You talk about using less crunchy methods, breech position, partial birth abortion. I mean, it's sick, and I think it's shocked the moral conscience of America. Whatever's left of it, it has been reinvigorated, and people have said this is absolutely wrong.
Well, what you're mentioning here is kind of like what you and I have talked about in our interview with those three down in Houston. Mm-hmm. It's one thing for us to say that these people are morally bankrupt, and I think they're mentally unbalanced. But it's like you had the experience down in Houston for the very first time of actually sitting in a room across the table or from these people and actually looking at them and hear them. Mm-hmm. And I remember the reaction that you had, and it's pretty profound reaction that you had to these people once they had left, was a lot driven by the fact that they were so cavalier about it.
Right.
And talking about, oh, look in this bag. Look at all these babies. Oh,
Right.
look how big that one is. And
Right. Just talking without emotion, like it's just an everyday thing, right?
Yeah. It's shocking to people to believe that there are people in the world like that.
Yes.
But one thing that's kind of alarming to me, Rasmussen actually did a poll on this. I don't know if y'all have seen this.
I haven't seen it yet.
It just came out. I just got it yesterday. They asked 1,000 Americans around the country, do you favor or oppose the sale of body organs from aborted babies for use in medical research? 25% of the American people said they were okay with it. Even some of them who claim to be pro-life.
But look at the question, that's kind of bland. Do you favor the sale of the body organs for medical research?
Right.
And boy, medical research is one of these holy cows of the left that, we science and medicine, you can never say anything against them. But I read a quote the other day by William Jennings, who is the attorney for the Scopes trial. He said, science is a brilliant and magnificent force, but it doesn't bring morals with it. It doesn't define morals. And we've talked about this on this program. The only ethics in science and medicine is not to make money. And here we have a perfect example of that, where Planned Parenthood is selling these body parts to make a profit and then distribute it out to these biotech firms where, again, profit's the only motive.
Right.
They did not ask, and you can go further on this, but they didn't ask the moral question, do you think it's right? Do you think it's right?
Well, not just that, but they're justifying if people are going to have an abortion, do something useful with the body, with the organs.
Right. Yeah, they're trying to say we can make something good come from this.
Right.
In other words, we can kiss this frog long enough, it'll turn into a prince.
Right.
Well, no, you can't. It'll be a frog for the rest of its life.
And that's the same argument that the Nazi doctors used to experiment on the people that they were murdering in Auschwitz.
Well, or I think even a better analogy here is because basically what these pro-aborts are, and I said this on an interview show the other day, they're grave robbers. They just happen to be robbing the graves of people they killed, but they're grave robbers.
Wow.
And if you think about it for a minute, it's absolutely no different than the Nazis taking the gold out of the teeth of the Jews that they killed. And they're saying, and their argument would have been, if you'd have had one of them here, their argument would have been, well, they're already dead, or they're going to be killed anyway. We might as well have some good from it, and we're taking that gold, and we're doing some good things over here. We're feeding people, or we're buying a new Mercedes-Benz, or whatever it is they're doing. Why bury those teeth? And so I challenge anybody to tell me how that argument is fundamentally different than this one. And it's not, and that's the argument.
Well, the other great irony here, the other great irony is that the woman is sold a bill of goods on walking into the front door of Planned Parenthood. They said, it's not a baby, it's a clump of cells, blob of tissue. We're just going to realign your menstrual cycle. What's inside you is completely worthless.
Right.
But after the procedure, out the back door, they're like ghouls hovering over the cadaver of this poor little child, chopping it up, saying, oh, the liver's worth $30, and the eyes are worth $100, and the lungs are worth this. And so now there's only value in the dead baby, not value in a live baby.
Well,
And I think that you see for women at least that there's obviously a vested interest in pushing you towards abortion because we can't make money off of you parenting or adopting. But now I think the curtain's kind of coming back and people can see, wow, there was a vested interest. And there was a woman who commented on Planned Parenthood's page, Facebook page, and said, I had an abortion 16 years ago and I've, praised you guys ever since and thought you were fine, but now I'm near suicidal because did you sell my baby?
Wow.
And it's bizarre because there is that disconnect, that the baby was terminated anyway, but at the time a clump of cells was terminated. Now she is hearing a human child was being sold for human parts for experimentation.
I bet that's going on in,
I bet
in
it's
a
going
lot
on
of
nationwide.
minds. Right. Where's my child?
It's horrifying.
well, yeah, but there's some intellectual dishonesty in there as well, because as you know, Renee, from the women that we've talked to since you've been working here, and that are post-aborted, that call in for they've been injured or whatever the case may be, a very high percentage of those women will tell you they knew that it was a baby.
Yeah, they do. Some
so
don't care.
Some of them may be deceived by the clump of cells argument, but most women know that it's a baby. And I've always said, and I said it back when we did this investigation originally, several things about it. First off, that it's really hypocritical not only of these women but of our society as a whole to all of a sudden now be aghast that they're going to sell these babies for parts. Well, what the hell difference does it make to you what you do with them after they're dead? If you're okay with them being killed, why do you care what happens to them after they're dead? What possible difference could it make? But the issue here is the media, again, in today, just like they did back when we did this originally, their intellectual dishonesty and their just basic dishonesty really shows through on this deal. Why are they asking, do you have a problem with donating this tissue? Why aren't they asking, do you have a problem with donating the eyes and the ears? It's not tissue, it's eyes, and it's
To be more detailed.
right, and
Yeah.
it's hip joints, and it's you go down the list of the parts list that we provided originally 15 years ago. It's
That was
not
opening
tissue.
lines, wasn't it?
Well, Opening Lines and another organization kind of called Anatomic Gift Foundation,
Right.
but there were others that we were looking at too, and they were all doing the same thing. And they're not calling it tissue; they're calling it eyes,
Right.
and a thymus, and a heart, and a liver, and an intact corpse. They want the whole thing intact. And it's like when they're buying the entire blood supply, and it's like our infiltrators told us back at that time. When they sell the entire blood supply, that means they had to get that baby out intact, because if they don't, then the blood spills out everywhere. So if you're going to sell the entire blood supply, you've got to get the baby out intact. So we're not talking about tissue. Tissue makes it sound very sterile and very medical.
Sure.
We're talking about selling parts of human beings.
Right.
That's where the intellectual dishonesty comes on.
Well, the other part that came out in the Deborah Nucatola video, the first video that we released, is that she describes a partial birth abortion right to a T.
Right.
In fact, we juxtaposed her words from the video with Leroy Carhart's words in his testimony during the partial birth abortion trial. And what she fails to mention in this is when the baby is delivered, that at what point does the baby cease to live? And I think it's glaringly obvious that she's doing a live birth abortion in order to harvest all the parts in proper wholeness.
Right.
Again, they can't use digoxin to kill the baby
I was gonna make
because
that point.
because the organs are tainted.
Right.
Well, and again, going back to the interview we did with the 3 down in Houston, they don't make any bones about the fact that they're taking these babies out whole and they're still alive.
Right. And the doctor pushing a hole in the head of the.
Or the throat, or,
Yeah.
or snapping the neck.
Right.
But
That's what it's forcing people to decide really where they belong. And I know you've always said that all pro-choicers are mentally ill and there's something wrong with them. And I've disagreed a little bit. I think there's definitely pro-aborts, and I think there's pro-choice people who honestly want to remain pretty blissfully ignorant about what's going on. And I think this has forced them to take a look at the issue and decide. And it's been bizarre for me because I've seen people who I thought I knew, who I figured they were the ones who would say, well, I personally wouldn't have an abortion, but I'm not going to tell other women. And they are fighting to rationalize this and make sense of it, and just buying into the complete explicit evil. And then I have other friends who I thought were more pro-abortion who are coming out and saying, this is disgusting, and they're finally acknowledging that yeah, you can't get human parts from a non-human being, so what does that mean? And I do think it's kind of separating the wheat from the chaff in the sense that it's forcing people to acknowledge what it is they're actually buying into.
We've talked here before, I've made this point before, that we're entering a phase of this battle, what I'm calling putting on your uniform. The American people are being forced that you cannot remain neutral anymore. You have to put on somebody's uniform. You have to put on this organization's uniform, or you put on this Army's uniform. But you're going to have to put on one or the other. But you know, the other thing I think that shows the hypocrisy and the just utter deceit of the American media is, why aren't they? Let's go back to an example. We had a guy a couple of years ago from Missouri, Republican, who said some really outrageous things, right? About women can't get pregnant and rape, and he said some other things that were pretty bizarre. Every Republican in this country was asked by somebody in the media, do you agree or disagree with this statement? Right? They were held accountable. Why is the media not going out and getting in front of all these Democrats in Congress and all these Democrats in the Senate and all these Democrats in state houses and saying, do you or do you not approve of what these people are doing and what this woman said? Do you or do you not? And they're never asking them that question. They're not forcing them to ask that question. And I'm wondering if God forbid, Hillary Clinton becomes the nominee, of course, it doesn't matter whether it's her or any of the other ones, they're all going to be the same. When the debates come, are they going to hold their feet to the fire on this? And my suspicion is they're not. But we'll see.
Well, I think, I won't say we, but God has perfectly positioned the release of these videos and the firestorm that's created to be within the presidential cycle. And it's going to be up to us to force the debate. The social media, as we spoke about earlier, is driving the debate right now. It's not MSNBC or CBS or ABC, it's social media. And who's social media? It's all of us.
Right.
So let's force the debate. Let's make them talk about it. Every single candidate should discuss this. And all the major Republican candidates have even talked about this and denounced it.
Right.
I want to introduce an article real quick that's just really disgusting. It's from Newsbuster, and it's about abortionist Willie Parker saying what Deborah Nucatelli did is like the...
Yeah, he's saying that what she's going through is what Jesus went through the week before his crucifixion.
Right. And there is absolutely no comparison.
Can you believe how crazy these people are?
And you think that I'm wrong when I say these people are nuts?
No, I'm saying the definite extreme pro-aborts they're insane. They will twist themselves with this logical gymnastics into a complete pretzel trying to justify this.
I showed you that yesterday, and your mouth kind of fell open.
I know. What?
Well, that explains
Really?
the God complex that they have, because they are playing God. They are taking life when they shouldn't be. So
Great point.
More of an antichrist, though.
Well, we've talked about that many times. Let's move on to some other interesting things. A lady that's one of our supporters sent me this magazine. She gets on all these leftist websites and so forth. This population
She sent
connection.
me one too.
Huh?
Did you read it? She sent me one as well.
It's interesting. This thing is about overpopulation and population control. Now they're talking about the world's water woes, and we're all running out of water. And of course, these are all the people that listened to people like Paul Ehrlich back in the 60s, who said there were going to be food riots in every city in the United States by the mid-'80s, which I guess I slept through the 80s because I never saw it. But anyway, it's interesting to see what their real agenda here is. Out of this book is 33 pages long, including the covers. Out of this book, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 complete pages are about abortion. In this one issue, on this one subject about water. And abortion, because we're not having enough abortions, basically what they're saying, if we don't have more abortions, we're all going to be out of water.
Right.
That is literally what did you read the thing?
I read it. In fact, one thing that struck me was, the quote was something along the lines of, the population is uncontrollable. The growth is unsustainable and uncontrollable. Right. And they projected by some year in the near future, there's going to be a gajillion more people. And they said, where's the water going to come from? Right. All you have to do is look at a satellite image of the world. Right. Where's the water going to come from? Are you kidding me?
Right.
What's the percentage of our world that's water?
2/3.
Well, and so I'm going to
water.
assume that they're also talking about the tainted water from chemical birth control and the abortifacients that are going back
into.
They didn't
mention that.
Oh, they don't mention that.
Isn't that weird?
That's so interesting.
But it's these people, I'm telling you, they're whacked. They're completely whacked out.
Where's the
And
water? It falls from the sky every single day.
And I will say Mark
Somewhere.
Crutcher's doing his part. He's bald because he does not use any type of
Right.
aerosol hairspray
Right.
or anything
That's
like
right.
that.
That's right.
You going green?
You
Wait a
care
minute.
about the environment.
That's very insensitive of you. I am not bald. I am follically challenged.
Follically challenged
Right.
by choice.
I often say that God only made a few perfect heads. The rest of me had to put hair on. Anyway,
Get a bumper sticker.
yeah.
Same thing with faces.
Moving on here. Speaking of whacked out pro aborts, you know the woman from the Dutch woman who's for years been doing the women on waves thing, and we talked about it many years at First Start. Now,
Oh, is this the abortion drones?
now
the
they're
abortion
building
drone wars?
drones
Yes.
to drone in birth control pills into Poland because Poland is outlawing abortion.
They should have been shot down.
Well, you know, just as a background, remember this started in the early '90s, the Women
Yeah.
on Waves, and they went and bought a little boat, and
Right.
they said we're going to go to countries around the world that don't provide
Get
abortions.
out in international
We're
waters.
gonna- and we're going to somehow bring the women that need abortions out to international waters, give them an abortion, and ship them back. It was a huge publicity stunt. They never did, I don't think, one single abortion.
I don't know.
And can you imagine a bunch of these hags on the waves anyway? I mean, leave them out there in the
Zipper
water.
used to say it's not women on waves, it's women on drugs.
And now they want to launch drones to drop birth control pills. It's completely
I'm
ridiculous.
picturing like
And
one
just-
of those Nazi propaganda things where it's like dun 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 dun. Just
I
trying
can
to
just imagine their little
sterilize
hobby
everyone.
kit, from Radio Shack drone that crashes into a tree and catches
all
on
you
fire.
got to do if you're there in Poland, one of these things comes flying over, is shoot it down or throw a net up and get it down when it lands to give the drugs, and you got yourself a drone. All you got to do is get the transmitter then, and you got a free drone.
What would
They just
happen if
want the
those poor
attention.
birth control pills landed into the hands of or paws of some endangered creature? And would the world just be completely upset
Oh.
that this endangered animal is now on birth control?
Yeah, right. Anyway, I'm telling you.
I think we should pandas. We have enough pandas in the
Pandas
world.
deserve better.
Pandas need birth
Yeah, let's
control.
start the campaign.
We continue to
birth control.
see lots of pro-choice violence around the country. We continue to see the pro-aborts. They've got a new strategy now. Used to, many years
Scream
ago.
louder.
Huh?
Scream louder. Screech.
Used to, they would engage us in debates, and I did a lot on college campuses and so forth. College campuses were kind of the standard place where you saw it. Now they've figured out they can't because they're completely out of ideas. They don't have any new ideas. All the new stuff that's coming out supports our position, all the new technology and so forth. So they're out of ideas. And so now they went through a phase where they said, we're just not going to debate with the pro-abort, but with the pro-lifers, the anti-choice, the antis as they call us. So we're just not going to debate with them and just let them do whatever they want to do. We're not going to debate with them. Now they've ratcheted it up. They're saying not only are we not going to debate with them, we don't want them spreading their message in the public. And so you're starting to see more and more of these things where they're trying to keep the pro-lifers, even if they're not going to be engaged with us, they try to keep us from spreading our message. And you're particularly seeing this on college campuses.
Well, I mean, if it's such a terrible message, then let us do it, right? Because as you say, if someone's digging a hole, get out of the way. Like, let them
Right,
keep digging.
let 'em
So obviously, we're not digging a hole. Then, if
Right.
they want to shut us down, there must be some truth to what we're saying.
Yep. Before we run out of time for this segment, I want to come up with some philosophical things that I just want to talk about. See if I'm totally nuts. Which I,
Watch out, Mark is
May
going
very
to
well
It's about to
wax
get deep.
eloquently.
why don't we have sanctuary cities for the unborn? In other words, if a city can stand up and say, let's say, for example, San Francisco or Houston, and the embarrassment of Texas. Austin used to be the embarrassment of Texas. I think Houston's trying to wrestle that title away from them. But Houston's a sanctuary city. So they just,
What does that mean, a sanctuary city?
They're protected.
yeah, they protect the illegal immigrants. They will not follow the federal law and turn them over, even if they've committed a crime.
So if you're here illegally from another country, no matter where you are, and you come to Houston, you come to San Francisco,
There are several sanctuary
you rob
cities.
a bank, a car, a dealership, whatever, and you get caught, they're not going to turn you over to immigration. and have you deported.
You may get indicted for that as a separate thing,
Right.
but they're not following the immigration laws. They're openly stating, we are a sanctuary city. We will not follow the federal immigration laws.
I mean, doesn't that violate the law?
And nobody's doing anything about it. And Obama is in favor of sanctuary cities. Now, why don't we have a city stand up and say, okay, you know what? We're going to be a sanctuary city for the unborn. The unborn are living human beings. We believe it. We're not going to allow any abortions to be done in this county. And say this is a sanctuary city. If we can have sanctuary cities against immigration law, in other words, the city can just up and say we're not going to follow the law. We know that's the law. We're not going to follow it. Then why aren't we having them for unborn children?
Well, if the question is being thrown out there, is we don't have politicians with enough backbone to do it. But perhaps now that we have, I think at last count, 9 states that have called for an investigation into Planned Parenthood, maybe one of those 9 governors are finally going to be emboldened enough to actually take a stand. Let's start with Texas, a sanctuary state in Texas.
For the unborn.
Yeah, there you go.
Speaking of politicians with courage, which we very often see, very rarely see, Ted Cruz did something here the other day that's pretty interesting, and it kind of follows along something that I've argued in the past. Ted Cruz is suggesting that the appointment of United States Supreme Court justices for life is a bad idea, and that they should have to stand for a retention election after 5 years on the bench and then every 2 years after that or something. And he's caught some flack for it because we're not supposed to elect Supreme Court justices because they're supposed to be apolitical, right?
But that's exactly what they are.
But yes, and if we're going to, as a culture, accept that the Supreme Court is another political body, then they should be elected. Mm-hmm. They should stand for retention election. And the question then becomes, and I don't want to go into a long civics lesson here. I'm not a civics professor. But there is a basic thing that people need to understand about the United States Supreme Court. And make no bones about it. It is a political body. And even some of the statements they're making solidify that they're conceding that it's a political body. They're looking at public opinion polls and what does the American people want to see happen on this particular issue, like same-sex marriage or whatever. And they're openly stating that their decisions are influenced by what the public wants. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a political body.
Right, not by the law.
The Supreme Court, anybody who thinks that the United States Supreme Court or even the federal bench right below that is a judicial body today you got to believe in the tooth fairy to believe that that's true. And so how did we get into this situation? And what you have to understand is if you go back and read the Founding Fathers and the way they designed our government, if you read the things that they wrote at that time, they were designing this 3-part government. You have the administration, then you have legislation, and golly, I lost my train of thought here.
Did you just Rick Perry?
I just Rick Perry'd here.
Gosh,
wow,
that was amazing.
But you have these 3 branches of government, right? And judicial is the third one, the one we're talking about. And they're supposed to be separate and have their separation of powers and all this. The Founding Fathers agreed that the one with the most potential to do harm was the judiciary. And so they made it the weakest. The judiciary had less power than Congress, which had less power than the administration, than the president. And the third one was, by far, the judiciary. Today, that's completely reversed.
Yeah.
To the point that you can have, and this is a hypothetical I've made before, you could have the state of Texas have an issue come up that literally 100% of the people of Texas were unified in what they believed. And it goes to the state legislature. It passes by 100% of the legislature. It's signed by the governor. A federal judge that has never set foot in the state of Texas can invalidate that, the way our current system is. So we have now reversed what the Founding Fathers wanted, and we've made the judiciary the strongest branch of our government instead of the Congress.
Executive. Congress, right.
Congress. How did we get into this position? And if you say that the Founding Fathers did not want the Supreme Court to be political, how did they insulate it from being political? And what happened to cause that to go away? It's very simple. And most people who haven't studied American history or haven't studied their civics don't realize they made the Supreme Court non-political by making it an appointed body, not an elected body. It was not even confirmed by an elected body. It was confirmed by the Senate, which was an appointed body at the time.
So is Ted Cruz proposing that it starts off appointed, but then you have to run for election 5 years after? Okay.
Yeah, it's called a retention election.
So there's going to be some accountability to the people?
Right. But here's the deal. That's not the way the Founding Fathers set it up. What he's saying, though, is that, okay, we abandoned what they said a long time ago. In 1913, we changed the Constitution to allow senators to be elected from each state rather than appointed from each state. And since the Senate is the one that confirms all federal judges and Supreme Court judges, then the moment that we politicize the Senate, we by extension politicize the Supreme Court. And what he's saying is, no, the system that I'm proposing, retention elections for Supreme Court justices, is not how the Founding Fathers set it up. And I agree with that. However, we've already abandoned that. We abandoned that in 1913. And now we have a political Supreme Court. And if they're going to be a political body, they need to be answerable to the people who vote. And the only way to do that is to have these retention elections. And so I've seen some conservatives who've jumped on Cruz over this issue. And like I said, he's right that and they're right that it's not the way the Founding Fathers designed it. But let's give up that fairy tale. We moved beyond that in 1913 when we started electing the Senate. So if we're going to elect the Senate, and they're a political body, and they're the ones who get to put these people on the court, and then they make what are basically political decisions, then they need to be answerable to that.
Absolutely.
And
here's how that would have worked in present day, previous to 1913, if we had appointed senators versus elected senators. Look at a state like California. Barbara Boxer and Dianne Feinstein, arguably some of those liberal, far-left, pro-abortion, godless senators in the Senate. But during their tenure there in the Senate, there's been several different changes in the governor of the state of California. You know, we had Pete Wilson, we had
Jerry Brown,
Gray Davis, Jerry Brown. Before that, we had Schwarzenegger. You know, but so conceivably, a Republican governor would appoint some Republican-type senators and would have replaced Dianne Feinstein and Barbara Boxer from their lifetime tenureship in the U.S. Senate. Now, I don't think Schwarzenegger would have appointed someone to the caliber of Ted Cruz, but I'll tell you, it wouldn't be as bad as a Boxer. And that way, we'd actually have a Senate that was confirming reasonable Supreme Court representative of the people, Supreme Court justice, not a Ruth Bader Ginsburg. My goodness, Sotomayor, she is whacked, and Kagan is completely left. I mean, these people are nuts, and they're destroying America.
And you know, going back to this same-sex marriage deal, two of those people that voted to invalidate all state laws against same-sex marriage have performed same-sex marriages
prior to
the decision,
which completely nullifies.
Shouldn't they have recused themselves from this?
Absolutely should have.
If there was if this was not a political decision but was a judicial decision, they would have set up and said, "Hey, I've already done these weddings. I'm not qualified to make this decision. So I'm going to recuse myself. I'm not going to vote on this." That's what somebody in a judicial setting would have done.
And this is one of the things I think is infuriating the American people. Anybody that counts themselves above the law, just like abortionists that think they're God. The Supreme Court justices literally think they're God. They can do things that no one else can do, and yet they don't recuse themselves because there's no higher power than themselves.
Well, even the Supreme Court has said, for example, and to your point about being God, that secular humanism is a religion. If secular humanism is indeed a religion, these people are the priests.
True.
Right? And they don't make any bones about it.
Right.
And, you know, I've said so many times, we've been stabbed in the back more often by Republican appointees to the Supreme Court than we've been stabbed in the chest by the Democrat appointees. And John Roberts is a perfect example of that.
Oh, yeah.
And there's been others that are just as bad.
Well, I've said many times that the Supreme Court will someday meet the Supreme Judge.
They certainly will. All right, listen, one of the things that's happened with this Baby Parts Expo, this newest one, is I think it's emboldened a lot of people that were previously kind of wishy-washy pro-life or concerned about it, just kind of kept their mouth shut. But I'll tell you something that's weird, and Renee and I were talking about this yesterday. There seems to have been, or we seem to be undergoing, a major increase in the amount of people that are interested in the issue of racism with Planned Parenthood. And people apparently feel emboldened now to come out and say, well, hey, there's another issue beyond this just selling the body parts. What about the racism of these people? And, you know, the MAFA project, MAFA 21 continues to rock and roll. And for people to, just for your knowledge, we've put out about 175,000 of the DVDs now. And of course, it's been watched by millions of people on television and in personal settings in churches and convention centers and things like that. But the project keeps on going. It keeps on growing, actually. It's getting bigger. But we have seen a real resurgence in it just in the last week or so. And you're having all these people come out holding Planned Parenthood's feet to the fire over the issue of racism. Ben Carson's done it. Ted Cruz has done it. New York Times has done it. Washington Times has done it. Fox Latino has done it. Rick Santorum's done it. Laura Ingraham has spoken out recently on it.
Yeah, she's great on the subject.
Rush Limbaugh, who's never really been all that interested in the pro-life thing, it didn't seem like. But the other day, somebody called me and said, hey, I just listened to Rush Limbaugh. He did about 6 or 8 minutes just lambasting Planned Parenthood, not over the baby parts thing, but over the racism issue. And if Black Lives Matter, why don't they all matter? And Planned Parenthood kills more blacks than you're worried about the Confederate flag and all that. More blacks were killed under this flag than under that flag. Why are you ignoring that one? Our buddy, Reverend Clenard Childress, is joining us from New Jersey. Hello, Clenard, how are you?
Oh, doing great. Happy to be with you.
I'm happy to have you. Of course, you're one of the people that was in MAAFA 21, and you've done a lot of work with it. And you've had for years now, every year, a presence at the NAACP conventions with MAAFA 21s and pushing this Black Lives Matter thing. And we got a thing from you the other day talking about the latest one, the 106th annual NAACP convention. You caused quite a stir up there. Tell us what you did.
Well, it was just a phenomenal presentation those 3 days. The weather agreed with us, and we were out there for 5 to 6 hours, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We had the ingenious signs produced by Greg Cunningham, Center for Bioethical Reform. We've been partnering with them. I keep telling him, you come up with the signs, I'll do the sermons, and we'll get this thing done. And we had the Confederate flag sign, which resonated the most. And of course, the other all Black Lives Matter signs that we have been using in predominantly African American audiences that is just totally being well received. And we exposed the fact that in 2004, we dug into their archives on their website where they proclaimed to be pro-choice. They later retracted that, but many people said we were lying about the fact that they had done this. And I don't know why it was just this year. I figured, something we could probably find that online. And a good friend who does our printing for us dug in and found it. And we were handing that out along with the roughly 1 million babies since then, that African-American children that have been killed since they have decided that they wanted to be gloriously pro-choice. Wow. So we passed out roughly 6,500 pieces of material to the 3,000 attendees. So I know we have some city people that we also hit, but it was just very well received. Of course, you had your normal people that objected, but it was very hard. People were breaking down, weeping outside. Once again, those who were post-abortive and were able to talk to some of the women that we brought down. We had a team of between 22 and 25 each day. We had 2 brave Caucasian pastors passing out with us Monday. My friend Philip Randall and his friend down there in Philly. He pastors in Philly. And so we just had a great time communicating, and it was extremely pivotal. As soon as we're down there doing this, it breaks with this Planned Parenthood and body parts. And Mark, I think it was your ministry that pointed us in that direction years ago. It's amazing how people are so shocked at this. They've been doing it for years.
Yeah,
so
it's not new.
It's great that we were there. We passed out MAAFA 21. A couple of people have said, keep doing what you're doing. We're making progress. These were NAACP delegates. And I do have a funny story if I have time.
Sure.
There's a lady that comes out. I can't say her name. I don't want to get her in trouble. A lady comes out. She's taking pictures of every sign that we have. She is a higher up. She's she's in the board, let's say this, not the national board, but the board in her city, and she has a high position. She comes out to me and says, "We got to get this into our city. Are you willing to come?" I said, "Sure. We got to get this in our city." And I said, "No problem." I said, "What's the name of your group?" And she says, "The National Action Committee." I got to get Al Sharpton involved in this.
Oh, yeah, good luck.
So I said, I said, that'd be a great idea. We could certainly use them. I left it right there. But it has showed me the ignorance of the politics of abortion in the African American community. Here, she's believing that Al is unaware of this.
Wow.
Right. Yeah.
And it just shows how skillfully they have censored this message and how they have distanced themselves from this message. But yet, as you well know, D. Nelson passed out a copy of my opera to everyone in the Congressional Black Caucus a couple years ago.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
They know this is going on, but yet they act so indifferent towards it when their body or their constituents find out that this genocide is going on. They assume our leadership couldn't possibly know. And this is going to be a lot of fun.
Clenard, you should have told that lady, ma'am, Reverend Sharpton is already involved. The problem is he's involved on the other side. So,
can I ask the Reverend a question?
Get in there first before she finds that out.
Right. Reverend Childress, I want to ask you a question. Now, why would, I know, but I want you to tell our audience why a group of African American pastors and leaders would bring a Confederate flag to an NAACP rally. Tell me about that sign.
Well, because I am appalled, I'm sure others are appalled, that we can yell and scream so much about a Confederate flag, and I think Mark alluded to earlier, there's far more damage done by the Planned Parenthood banner and abortion than a Confederate flag ever thought about being able to do. Yet they use these things for political ploys and intimidation, and yet we are ignoring the 1,786 African-American children that are killed each day, led by the leading abortion provider. 20% of all abortions in the country, Planned Parenthood does, which therefore it is Planned Parenthood, which is the leading killer of African-Americans, since African-Americans make up only 12% of the population, but are accounting for 36% of the abortions. So where is the outrage over abortion and the targeting of the African-American community? And how can you bring to the height of furor over the flag, over the Confederate flag, when you're ignoring the atrocity that's going on daily by the abortion industry?
Yeah, there is a almost breathtaking hypocrisy.
That's a good way of putting it.
Amongst this group of people, and it's a testament to that thing that we've talked about here many times. The human mind is the only organism in nature that has the capacity to intentionally trick itself, and that's what this is about. These people have tricked themselves into believing that this genocide isn't really genocide. I didn't really see what I think I just saw, and so it's okay because politically we'd rather be on that side. Clenard, I haven't talked to you about this, but I want to throw out a theory that I have, and before we lose you here, I have a theory that once Barack Obama is out of office, we're going to see this black genocide thing really erupt. Not because he is tamping it down, although he is, but that's not the reason that it's going to erupt once he's gone. I think there's a certain sense among many people in the black community that they look at policies that Obama has put forward that have actually harmed the black community, even if you leave out the abortion issue. I mean, black unemployment rates have gone through the roof, poverty rates higher, more of them on food stamps, all those things. But they almost feel disloyal in opposing Obama as the first black president.
That's correct.
And so they kind of look at these other issues, abortion and some of these other things, and they kind of wink and nod at them and say, okay, yeah, I'm uncomfortable about that, but we can't be disloyal to the first black president. Once he's gone, and let's say it's Hillary Clinton or some other godless leftist that they're going to put out there. I don't think they'll have that same resistance that they're showing now, and so they'll be more willing to look at the black genocide and the connection to Planned Parenthood issue that they're not currently willing to do. Do you think that's wrong?
No, that's quite accurate. And I think Barack Obama really, as I stated at the beginning of his presidency, that indeed we would begin to look at abortion more so now because of his just being so linked to Planned Parenthood being a fundraiser, and that people would look at it, but as you've already stated, because of loyalty, they will not truly become outraged or oppose it too vehemently at all. But yes, as he is leaving, there's no question there's going to be those who step up far more so than they had previously. And let's face it, Clinton and the Obamas aren't the best of family members anyway.
Right.
It very well may be quite easier if it's Hillary Clinton. So we stand right at the precipice of a great awakening, I believe, where the necessary steps will be taken in the African American community to bring this from the back burner to the front burner, and that's the reason why we're outside in front of NAACP and other gatherings, that this is not being discussed on the inside. We have the truth. We will win in any debate. They know that, but it's going to be, as you stated, far easier when Barack Obama is not sitting in the Oval Office. I agree with that.
Well, then, if we agree that's true, then I think we can look back and see God's timing in this deal.
Yes.
Because we came out with Maafa in 2009, and most pro-life projects have a pretty short shelf life. They'll come out 90 days later, you moved on to the next thing. Here we are 6 years down the road, and Maafa 21 is growing. This whole black genocide thing is burgeoning like what you're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to be open to the idea that God allowed Maafa 21 to come along when he did to prepare us. In other words, we've laid the groundwork.
Yes.
You know, we produced it.
Broken up. Yes.
We produced it. Guys like you and Johnny Hunter and all the other people around the country are out on the streets promoting this. It's growing and growing. It's 6 years. We're 6 years into it, and we're looking at the end of the Obama administration coming up here fairly quickly. We're going to be ready to take this to the mat.
No question about it. And not only that, it's really resonating more so now because, you know, the buyer's remorse is setting in. No doubt, and as you stated previously, they will not revolt. Okay, they're not going to revolt against the Democratic Party or because of Barack Obama. But those seeds, that information is settling, and we really need preachers during this time that's coming to be willing to take the message to the pulpit, to the streets, because the ground has already been broken up for them to receive what they're going to say. And so, and that, yes, and it would take years for that to have happened. And that's why Maafa came out when it did. It was to begin that process, probably the last wave of the last revival in this country, because this country desperately needs revival. And you can't have revival with the church in an agreement of killing babies.
Right.
So, yes, this is all God's timing, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Well, we're happy to have you. None of this would have happened without the cooperation of you and the others that are in the video and that helped me behind the scenes. But again, I think that it's a miraculous thing. We didn't know in 2009 that this is what was happening. We just came out with it. It exploded. We went on down the trail. But now looking back on it, it's clear that God had a plan, which he always does, even whether we're too stupid to figure it out or not. He's always got a plan. And I think he just prepared us. Because if we had come out with Maafa 21, let's say that we're ratchet forward now, and we're to the point that Barack Obama is leaving office, and let's say at that time we released Maafa, it would have taken us 5 or 6 years to get to the point where we are today.
That's right.
And that opportunity would have been blown. But now we have an opportunity. We're tanned and rested. You know what I mean? We're ready to rock and roll with this. We've got experience with it. We've got credibility with it. And we're still waiting for the first time that Planned Parenthood or any of the other people in the abortion industry come out and say that there's something wrong with my AFA, that this is factually incorrect, this is factually incorrect. For 6 years, they've never once been able to say that because we did our homework on that.
Yes.
And I think we're ready, we're poised right now.
Well, the beauty of my Alpha 21 is, I don't know with you or anyone else, no one refutes anything in it. No one takes issue
Right.
and can say that that is false information or that's hyperbole or that you're just some radical right-wing reverend talking nonsense. But it is well done. But yet now, for such a time as this, I believe, that those who have watched it and have kind of just pondered upon it, I believe are going to be driven to act upon the information that they've learned. Even this recent sting gives credibility to My Alpha 21 because much of what is exposed in My Alpha 21 is behind the scenes and no one is aware of the connections and the diabolical plots that are focused against the African American community. So this is all good. I just hope we don't, as a pro-life ministries, don't make mistakes. This is a great open door. And I believe, and many people are saying that they feel it is turning, despite the judges we have. And of course, we the people can still get it done. And I think there's going to be more social activism now than ever before also because of all these events seem to be culminating at the same time.
And Reverend, can I ask you, I know that the March Across Selma happened, and you're having these women raise up and talk about how abortion has affected them. And I'm kind of curious, since the percentages proportionally of African American women who are having abortions is so much higher, there is clearly a target on that community. Are those women coming out more and speaking up? Because I think when you're in a family where maybe your mother and sister and friend have all had an abortion, it does feel like maybe it's not that big of a deal. But once we start hearing stories of women saying, this is how I was wounded by it, this is the child I lost, and kind of adding a face to the regret and the remorse, that really kind of sends shockwaves out into a community. Are you finding that more women are speaking out about their experience being targeted for abortions?
Oh, absolutely. We're presently doing a inner city project in New York City with just that. We've looked at the Silent No More tapes, and what we're going to do is get regular community people to give testimony for 2 to 3 minutes, and we're asking churches to show that during their service as a point of contact, because needless to say, when women who have had abortions or have experienced a sister, someone close to them who have had one speak, it far more resonates, it's far more moving than any other source. And so we are right now, as I speak, in a search over these next 2 weeks to find those African-American women, Hispanic women, and then begin to go into churches and say, listen, everybody's using a video during their announcements. We sat down and said, well, let's ask for 3 minutes of that. No more, nothing graphic, nothing where someone in the congregation would gasp, but honest, tear-felt testimony of asking people to please help and get involved so we can avoid this tragic situation for these young girls who are being trapped in this over-sexualized society. And so, yes, we are searching right now locally. People who they would know they're not stars or professional athletes or anything of that sort, just everyday people who are going to share, and I'm praying and believing it's going to be successful. And I think that's going to open up the door for more discussion. As you well know, my people are destroyed because of the lack of knowledge. Right. And I think this is going to cause them to be willing to accept that knowledge, and it needs to be discussed. If the discussion begins, we win. We don't lose the debate. Right. And so this is what we have to do as preachers, is find ways to get into congregations and begin the discussion, not just the nodding of the head.
I think it's going to be very powerful to hear those testimonies, because so many women probably do live with guilt and remorse and shame, but they're told, well, it's legal and everyone's okay with it. And as far as they know, no one else regrets it. So when you finally have one woman who can say, this has devastated me and I had a natural biological reaction to this choice that I made, and this is the grief I'm living with, I think it's going to unlock the hearts of so many women and cause a tidal wave of change within the community.
Well, listen.
Well, it was a post-abortive woman last week that talked with a minister. This woman is pastoring. That she said, I've never dealt with this. She was out there for 10 or 15 minutes. She didn't have a discussion with me. She had a discussion with one of our women. The next thing I looked over, they're holding each other, weeping.
Wow.
In front of one and just weeping. She said, I've never dealt with this. I'm so happy. I feel free. And I'm going to share this. I'm going to share this when I go back.
Well, Clenard,
So there's no question, as you've stated, this is going to help families, church families. It's very also non-political.
right.
And so the people are just left with this saying, well, listen, I got to do something. You could be Democrat, Republican. You can't really hear this, begin a discussion on this, and not want to do something.
Yeah. Well, listen, Clenard, Renee and I want to visit with you later today. I know you're needing another supply of Alpha 21s, and we've got some other ideas we want to talk to you about relative to this Black Lives Matter. So she and I will be talking to you later in the day.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me, and God bless all of you.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you for being with us, and thanks for all that you're doing out there.
Okay.
All right. Again, I've said it many times. We can't lose.
We've got pastors like that on
We've
our
got
side.
people like that on our side. We can't lose.
So there's 3,000 people at the NAACP convention. They handed out 6,000 pieces of material.
Right.
That's amazing.
Yep.
Pretty awesome.
And he ran out of my Alpha 21s. We've
That's
got to
awesome.
get him some more. I want to go over just a couple of real quick things here. We're basically out of time. As usual, we ran out of time. First off, we've been doing some calls. You've been making some calls, and a couple other people in the office, to Live Talk subscribers, kind of getting their input. And we're getting a lot of good input because we are going to be making changes to Live Talk. And we've already made some. You know, Live Talk is now available online. You can watch it for free. And that's a much better way of doing it because you get the information about 2 weeks before. It'll be 2 weeks before this gets into the hands of people. It'll be online here in the next day or so, maybe even tomorrow.
People love the show, and they're still having it as their monthly meetings. And
Right. Yeah, you've had a lot of interesting conversations with people. So
I have.
yeah, as has the other people
Yes.
that are making the calls. But we are very interested in people's feedback. So if you know somebody out there is watching this and they have, hey, this is what I'd like to see you do more of, or this is what I'd like to see you do less of, or just give us a call. Call Renee, and the number's on the screen. Just call Renee or actually talk to whoever answers the phone. But we would like to have your input. We are going to have to make some changes to Live Talk. You know, we live in a society now that everything changes real quickly. Whatever's the trendy, hot thing today is yesterday's news 6 months from now. It's old. And so we're going to have to be making some changes, and we are going to be making some changes.
Well, this show's been constantly evolving
Yeah,
for the
it
10
has.
years I've been on it.
Right. It's
They'll probably say something like more Destiny and more Renee and less of us.
probably, yeah, probably so. Also, if you're wanting information, we've had a lot of people call because they recognize that we were the group that did the baby parts thing to begin with, and they're calling wanting information. If you'll go to prolifeamerica.com, and there's a button on there called Reports and Projects, and you click on there, you can read all the report, everything that we did back in the day. You can see the price list, you can see the Miles Jones interview on 2020, you can see all the stuff that we did. So you don't need to call us to get that. It's right there. There's no charge for getting it. The last thing I want to bring up is our People of Choice website. It's been real successful, but we've kind of seen it falling off in the number of people that are sending us stuff. If you've seen something that's outrageous, and believe me, these people are a constant stream of outrageous behavior. If you get some kind of video, if you get some kind of pictures, quotes from a newspaper that's something outrageous they said, make sure and send it to us. And you can send it to peopleofchoice.com. If you go on there, there's a place to submit whatever it is. But we want to keep that site growing. It's kind of leveled off here in the last few days. So I wanted to make sure we got that in. But anyway, that's pretty much it. Great show, guys. Thank you. Did a good job, Renee and Destiny and even Troy.
That's why I'm here.
A serviceable job, let's put it that way. Thanks for being back again. Well, that's all the time we have for this month. Thanks for joining us, and don't ever forget, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight, we're here to win, because winning is how this killing is going to stop. We'll see you in September.